Hello, and welcome to this podcast all about Mother's Diaries, 1948 to 1976, and Hiltonbury Farm Chandlers Ford. My name is Andy Vining. I'm 82 years old, and as I record this, I'm sitting quietly at home in Chandlers Ford in Hampshire, thinking about the past and about the voices, people, and places that shaped my life. This podcast is not about me, it's about our family, or my family, memories, places, and the quiet everyday moments that would normally be lost to time. But most of all, it's about my mother and the diary she wrote about her everyday life, being a farmer's wife and mother of 5 children while we were all growing up on Hiltonbury Farm in Chandlers Ford. But before I begin to read those diaries, I think it's only right that I tell you a little about where this story truly starts and how I come to be here, speaking to you today. To understand our story, we must go back before my own childhood, back to my mother and father and to Hiltonbury Farm in Chandlers Ford. My father's life began with difficulty because, as a young boy, he was orphaned, and for a time the future must have seemed very uncertain for him. But kindness changed everything because he was taken in at Hiltonbury Farm by Mr. and Mrs. George and Toss Beattie, my father's aunt, an extraordinary act of generosity that shaped the whole course of our family's history. There at Hiltonbury, he grew up not only with a home but with a purpose. He attended Peter Symonds School in Winchester, cycling there every day on his bike in all weathers, while at the same time he also learned the hard, honest work of farming, working the land at Hiltonbury as a young man, hand milking from a young age and tending the fields and the crops. Those early years of learning and labour formed the quiet strength that would guide him throughout his life. Then, not long before the Second World War, around 1934, he moved to Cantley, just near Wokingham, in Berkshire, where he became farm bailiff for Mr. Watson, a wealthy man who'd made his fortune in margarine. And so it was in Cantley that the next chapter of our family truly began. My mother and father were married there on the 21st of November 1936, a beginning filled, I imagine, with hope, but with no idea of the world events that were soon to unfold. Then, on the 6th of February 1938, my eldest sister Jennifer was born. And 2 years later, on the 11th of June 1940, in the shadow of wartime Britain, my second sister Janet arrived on the scene. During those years, not only was my father the farm bailiff, but he was in the local fire service throughout the Blitz and in the local Home Guard. I only wish I'd asked him more about those days when he was alive, but we never seemed to talk about those times. Then, amazingly, on the 6th of April 1943, I arrived on the scene. A boy at last, after the girls, and it was right in the middle of those difficult war years with bombing raids going on. I understand from stories that I was told that Hitler had heard that I'd arrived and he attempted to bomb the nursing home where I was sleeping. But I was put into a basket and put under the bed, and fortunately for me, he missed. But a poor Guernsey cow, minding her own business in the fields, called Forget-Me-Not, was killed. We certainly never forgot her. Anyway, I digress. In 1946, just after the war ended, when I was just 3 years old, the family left Cantley and moved to Chandlers Ford, moving into Beechcroft in Lakewood Road. It was my grandparents' house, where my mother had lived before she was married to father, and we were to live there as a family for about 8 months, while Hiltonbury Farmhouse was made ready for the Vining family to move into. Beechcroft became the true starting point of memory for me of Chandlers Ford. It was a lovely crowded house full of life. My grandmother and grandfather, Auntie Bella, Granny's sister, and Granny's father, old Mr. O'Brien, my great-grandfather, and my 2 sisters, and of course mother and father. Family and people were always coming and going, father working at Hiltonbury Farm and trying to get the house ready for us to move in, Voices in the house, the rhythm of ordinary days, and the sense that childhood was something safe and steady after the war, with the family all together. Then, in late 1946, we moved from Beechcroft to live in Hiltonbury Farmhouse. I was too young, of course, to remember the first year or two there, but I'm led to believe from things my father told us that when we moved in, there was no running water, and the well that had always supplied the house was condemned by the local council as unfit to drink. So for over a year, the milk lorry that came to collect the milk every morning from our milking herd delivered 10 churns of water for us. There was also no electricity, and we had bottled gas lighting downstairs and candles and Tilly paraffin lamps upstairs. All extremely basic, but we did have a battery radio and a telephone. Chandlers Ford 1212. Funny how I remember that. Not long after we moved into the farmhouse, my younger sister Heather was born in a nursing home in Shawford near Winchester on the 19th of January 1947, and that winter was one of the coldest ever known. Snow lay deep across the country. Roads were blocked. Daily life was a struggle. No one could even visit my mother in the nursing home because the snow was simply too deep. That is a small detail, but somehow it tells us everything about the world into which Mother's diaries were born. A world of hardship, endurance, and quiet courage. Although I could not have known it at the time as I was so young, that not long after my sister was born, about a year, those ordinary days were quietly being written down because my mother started to keep these diaries. They were not grand literary diaries, not written for the history book, but simple, faithful records of daily life. Who visited the farm? What the weather was like? The work on the farm? Deaths and births? Illnesses? Birthdays? Small worries? Small joys? The sort of details most of us never ever record and later wish we had. Our lives became closely tied with Hiltonbury Farm, of course, the same place where my father had lived and worked as a young orphan boy. A circle, in a way, quietly closing. Farming life is never easy, never was and never is, and never will be. It follows the seasons, not the clock. Animals must be fed, whatever the weather. Cows milked, eggs collected, fields ploughed, crops grown or failed, according to the forces of nature beyond our control. But farming life, it also gives something precious. It gives a sense of purpose, of belonging to the land and of our family working side by side, working together and growing up together. Many of the names you will hear in these diaries readings belong to that world. Family members, neighbours, friends, workers, people whose lives touched ours in the quiet and lasting ways. And later in the diaries, another miracle appears. My brother Simon, born on April 13th, 1958. And he is, as far as we know, the only child to be born in Hiltonbury Farmhouse for more than 100 years. Moments like that remind us that history is not only made in great events, but in families, in homes, in new life arriving, and as the years pass, life moves on as it does for all of us. As I've said, this is not my story, but the story of a farming family, noted down every day by my mother as I grew up. When I grew up, I first found my path in farming. And while I was still farming in 1964, I married my wonderful wife Val, and together we built a life filled with family, hard work, laughter and love. Sadly, after nearly 60 years, my Val is no longer with us, but speaking her name carries both warmth and sadness. And I know she is looking down on me, remembering the wonderful years we had together, and our lives with my son Alex and daughter Joanne, and later the arrival of our wonderful 3 grandchildren, Tom, Amy and Ellen, and now our beautiful great-grandchild born to Vicky and Tom on the 24th of June 2024. My Val is part of this story too, deeply and forever, because this podcast is not only about the past, it is also about remembering the people we love and keeping them close. All my sisters and my brother have all got extended families now, and last May 2025 We had a gathering at the Hiltonbury Farmhouse in Chandlers Ford, where we used to live and is now a pub and restaurant. Over 50 people, brothers, sisters, mothers, fathers, cousins and grandchildren, all together as one amazing family. On the walls of the pub in Hiltonbury now are many pictures of our family when we were there: mother, father, myself, my sisters, the weddings that went on from there, and they're all portrayed in the pub, and we're very, very thankful as a family for them keeping this memory alive. My mother passed away in 1994 from cancer, and after she passed, her diaries remained quiet, patient, waiting on a shelf in my sister Janet's house in Devon. For many years they were simply there, talked about and part of the background of life, until one day I began to read them, and something extraordinary happened. The past came alive, not as a grand history, but as real days, cold mornings, shopping trips, visitors calling, animals being born, animals dying, illness in the house, harvests gathered, haymaking and the weather that affected every day in some way or other. Small chicks arriving to busy Christmases preparing chicken and turkeys plucked and drawn ready to sell. Horses shod, donkeys fed, cows milked, and puppies and kittens born. All the texture of ordinary living on a family farm preserved in ink, line by line, day by day. I realised then that these diaries were not just family papers. They were a doorway back into a vanished England, and into the heart of a family story that still matters. And that is why I'm making this podcast now, at this stage of my life, because time passes quickly, voices fade, memories blur, names are forgotten, but the stories can remain if we take the time to tell them. I don't know who will listen to these recordings. Perhaps no one. Perhaps family. Perhaps friends. Perhaps someone somewhere who simply enjoys hearing about ordinary farming and family life in another time. Whoever you are, and you are listening, you are very welcome here. Think of this as sitting quietly beside the log fire in the old farmhouse in Chandlers Ford, listening to an old friend remember. So now we're almost ready to begin. In a moment, I'll open my mother's diaries and read the first entry from 1948. Also, I invite you to slow down with me, to picture the places, to imagine the people, to feel the rhythm of days when life was simpler but never easy. It is not a story of famous events, it is something gentler than that. It is the story of a family, living ordinary days, which in the end are the most precious days of all. Thank you for being here at the beginning, and I hope that I do my mother's words justice, and the next week I will begin reading from her diaries, which I've condensed into monthly sections. I will, when reading them from time to time, interject with comments from my own memories or research I have done while preparing the diaries, such as saying, what's the price of something back in the 1940s and 50s would be today? And also I will try to name and say who some of the people are that appear in the diary as the days go by, but that, of course, is if I have known them or can remember them myself. But enough for now, and we'll soon start the next episode, when the year is 1948. Winter holds the Hampshire countryside in its grip. Snow lies heavy on the fields. Snowdrops press through the frozen earth, and the quiet rhythm of the farm and family life goes on. Beyond the everyday work of washing, cooking and tending animals, a deeper story is unfolding, one of worry, one of endurance, and of love held close in uncertain days. These are not grand events of history, but the small, true moments of ordinary lives, and it is there that our story truly begins. I hope you can join me next time to hear my mother's story about the family and Hiltonbury Farm Chandlers Ford. Thank you for listening.